What is up, brawlers, bladers, and fellow awesome nerds? It is I, Bakudad, one half of the Baku Boys, and if this is your first time to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. Also, please be sure to drop us a comment and check out our other projects in the description below, as we do try and release weekly Bakugan, Beyblade, and other awesome nerdy content every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into what I've got in store for you guys for this video. So today is Saturday, February 18th, and for today's video, I actually have something super awesome lined up for you guys. This is something that I have not done in quite a while, but I'm super excited to do for you. I am actually going to be running a Magic the Gathering deck profile. We have not done a deck profile video in a long time, and I am super excited to do a Magic the Gathering one, but we're not going to waste that much more time. We're going to jump straight to the table where we are going to get this deck profile directly underway. I will catch you guys at the table in just a moment. Yow! And welcome back to the table where we are ready to get this Magic the Gathering deck profile underway. And what we're going to be checking out today is my personal commander deck. And for those of you who are slightly familiar with Magic the Gathering, but not familiar with all of its formats, or not really familiar at all, what Commander is it's a special format in Magic the Gathering, which is different than the regular 60-card format. In the 60-card format, you are allowed to have 4 copies of any one card in your deck beside basic land. You are allowed to have as many basic lands in your deck as you want. But in Commander, it is a little different. In Commander, we use a 100 card deck with 99 cards being literally the basic foundation of your deck, and your 100th card is your commander, the leader of your deck. And for the 99 other cards that make up your deck, you are only allowed to have 1 copy of each card in your deck besides basic lands. So for my commander deck, we are going to be taking a look at my personal commander deck for Shadowheart Dark Justiciar. And this is the commander of my deck. And also, whatever color your commander deck is, you can only use cards of that color in your deck. So if you're playing a multicolor commander, you can use only the colors that are in that multicolored commander. Like, say you were playing a red, blue, green commander, you could only use red, blue, green cards. My deck is mono black. And for my commander, he has got some super awesome abilities. We might have seen this one in the past, but we'll go over him again. Shadowheart Dark Justiciar for a Swamp and 3. He is a 3/4 legendary human elf cleric with the ability of pay 1 and a swamp and tap, sacrifice another creature, draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. And he has a special ability, choose a background. So you can have a background as a secondary commander, which means I actually have a 101 card commander deck because of the because of the extra commander that I have because of the background. So my background that I got to choose, or that I chose, is Agent of the Iron Throne. And I could have actually chose a different color background to actually play off other colors as well, but I decided to go completely mono black and even go with black with my background. So Agent of the Iron Throne for a Swamp and 2. It's a legendary enchantment background. Commanded creatures you own have, whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So you can already see how these combo together. This guy sacrifices my creatures, or this guy sacrifices my creatures, and this guy pokes all my opponents for 1 damage, or my background pokes all my opponents for 1 damage for every time a creature on my side of the battlefield gets put into the graveyard. So that is what I built my deck around. And here are just some treasure tokens that I use for one of the cards in my deck. So the other 99 cards. So we'll first start off with all my basic lands, and things are going to get a little bit interesting. So for my basic lands, all I have are all these really nice, pretty swamps. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 basic swamps, which will give us 23. So the other 76 are going to be all the other cards, because we do have some other land cards in here, but they are not basic. They are more non-basic lands, and we can only have one copy of each non-basic land in the deck. So starting off with a very special one, because it's got a super special ability, the Hostile Hostile. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana, and its other ability is tap 1 mana and tap, sacrifice a creature, put a soul counter on Hostile Hostile. Then if there are 3 or more soul counters on it, remove those counters, transform it, then untap it. Activate only as a sorcery. And then when it transforms, it becomes the Creeping Inn, a 3/7 horror construct. Whenever Creeping Inn attacks, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of creature cards exiled with Creeping Inn. And then you can pay 4. Creeping Inn phases out. And this is the only transforming card in my deck. I actually have my deck double sleeved, so a clear, nice, full fit sleeve, or a perfect fit sleeve for my card, and then right into my nice Dragon Shield sleeves. So that's the Hostile Hostile. Then we have Desert of the Glorified. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a swamp, and it has cycling for 1 and a swamp. You can discard this card to draw a card, and that's the power. That's what cycling does. You discard the card from your hand and draw a card for whatever the cycling cost is. And then we have Barren Moor. It enters play. It comes into play tapped. You can tap to add a swamp. Then we have Tectonic Edge. Tap to add 1 to your mana pool, 1 colorless, and then for a colorless and tap, you can sacrifice Tectonic Edge. Destroy target non-basic land. Activate this ability only if an opponent controls 4 or more lands. So that's actually a really nice way for me to eliminate some other lands, non-basic land threats that my opponent has. Polluted Mire. It enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add a swamp, and it's got cycling for 2 colorless. Myriad Landscape, it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap to add a colorless, and then 2 and tap, sacrifice Myriad Landscape, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So a nice way for me to ramp up on some of my basic lands. Ghost Quarter, you can tap to add a colorless, or tap to sacrifice Ghost Quarter. Destroy target land. Its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle his or her library. So being able to eliminate other non-basic lands that I don't like on my opponent's side of the field. Right here we have the Bajuka Bog. It enters the battlefield tapped. And when Bajuka Bog enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So I can actually get rid of one of my opponent's graveyards if I don't like, if they've got a lot of stuff in their graveyard that I don't want them getting back. And it also taps for a swamp. And then we have the Rogue's Passage. You can tap to add a colorless, or pay 4 and tap. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. So pretty much making a creature unblockable. That is actually really nice with the Rogue's Passage. And then we have the Maze of Ith. You can tap it to untap target attacking creature. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by that creature this turn. So that's actually really nice for being able to kind of stop some threat on your opponent's side of the field. And now we're getting into, I've only got 9 proxies in this deck, and proxies are technically cards that I already have that I didn't want to go ahead and pull from other decks, but I went ahead and made copies of them so I can go ahead and use them in the deck I have. So we have the Reliquary Tower. You have no maximum hand size, and you can tap it to add a colorless mana. And then we have the Tomb of the Fortress land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add a swamp, or you can pay 2 colorless, 3 swamps, and tap it, exile Tomb Fortress, mill 4 cards, then return a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. And that is the rest of the lands that are in my deck. Now the rest is all creatures and spells. So we're looking at Darkness now, which costs 1 swamp, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So a black version of Fog. And then we have the Blood Artist. For a swamp in 1, it's a 0/1 vampire. Whenever this or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Scepter of Eternal Glory. For 4, it's a legendary artifact. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color. And then you can also tap to add 3 mana of any 1 color. Activate only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. So as long as I control 3 swamps, I can go ahead and tap the Scepter of Eternal Glory to go ahead and give me 3 more swamps. And then here's one of my favorite artifacts that works really good in monocolor decks. Cage Sun for 6, it's an artifact. As this enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1, and whenever a land's ability causes you to add 1 or more mana of the chosen color, add 1 additional mana of that color. So technically doubling all my swamps or any of my other lands that produce swamps. They are all doubled. And now Thought Vessel for 2, it's an artifact. You have no maximum hand size, and it can tap to add a colorless mana. So I have 2 sources in the deck that allow me to not have a hand limit. The Endless Artifact, or the Endless Atlas for 2, this artifact allows you to pay 2 colorless and tap, draw a card, activate only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. Gilded Lotus, for 5, this artifact allows you to tap, add 3 mana of any 1 color. Phyrexian Fleshgorger. For 7, it is a 7/5 Phyrexian Worm, or for a 1 generic and 2 swamps, it is a 3/3 Phyrexian Worm for the prototype ability, but regardless of if you do the prototype or the regular mana cost for it, it comes out with Menace and Lifelink and Ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian Fleshgorger's power. So that actually makes it good for if anyone wants to target that, they're going to have to pay life equal to its power. So if I actually play it for the 7 and it comes out as a 7/5, anything that my opponents do to it, they're going to have to pay 7 life. Or 3 if I play the prototype. Still a pretty good card for that ward effect. Activated Sleeper for Swamp in 2. It is a 0/0 Phyrexian Shapeshifter with Flash. You may have activated Sleeper enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature card in a graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, except it's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. So being able to copy a creature that died, whether it's on my opponent's side of the battlefield, that is actually good for the activated Sleeper. And here's the card where I need the treasure tokens. The Zhentarim Bandit. For a swamp in 1, it is a 2/1 halfling rogue. Whenever Zhentarim Bandit attacks, you may pay 1 life. If you do, create a treasure token. Treasure tokens are artifacts with, you can tap it to sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. So being able to generate me mana is actually nice with the Zhentarim Bandit. And then Summon Undead. For a swamp in 4, you may mill 3 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Wayfarer's Bauble for 1. It's a you can pay 2 and tap, sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Mask of Memory for 2. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, discard a card, and then the equip cost is 1. Sculpting Steel for 3. You may have Sculpting Steel enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. So that's really nice for me, being able to copy any artifact that I see that I want, whether it's my own or one of my opponents. Infernal Grasp. For a swamp in 1, destroy target creature, you lose 2 life. This is actually one of my favorite cards in my deck. So for 3 Phyrexian swamps and 4, so for Phyrexian mana, you can pay 2 life or pay the desired color. So you can pay 3 swamps or 6 life and 4. But it is Post Malone, or Post Son of Rich, which is a reprint of Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, which is a 2/2 Phyrexian horror minion with lifelink, and for each swamp in a cost, you may pay 2 life rather than pay that mana. And whenever you cast a black spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Post Son of Rich. And then we have Assassin's Ink. For 2 swamps and 2, this spell costs 1 less to cast if you control an artifact, and 1 less to cast if you control an enchantment. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. So technically, if I control both an artifact and an enchantment, I can just pay the 2 swamps for the Assassin's Ink instead of the 2 swamps and 2 generic. And then for 2 swamps and 3, we have Painful Quandary. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. Then Debt to the Kami. For a swamp and 2, choose 1. Target opponent exiles a creature they control, or target opponent exiles an enchantment they control. Illicit Shipment. For 2 swamps and 3, it has Casualty 3. As you cast this spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power 3 or greater. When you do, copy this spell. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Extinguish the Light. For 2 swamps and 2. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. If its mana value was 3 or less, you gain 3 life. Witch of the Moors. For 2 swamps and 3, it is a 4/4 human warlock with Death Touch, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and you return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hands. The Arcane Signet. For 2, you can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Prophetic Prism. 2, when Prophetic Prism enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then for 1 generic and tap, add 1 mana of any color. Commander Sphere. For 3, you can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Sacrifice Commander Sphere, draw a card. The Ancient Brass Dragon. For 2 swamps and 5, it is a 7/6 Elder Dragon with flying. Whenever Ancient Brass Dragon deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. When you do, put any number of target creature cards with total mana value X or less from graveyards onto the battlefield under control, where X is the result. Patriarch's Seal. For 3, you can tap to add 1 mana of any color. For 1 generic and untap target legendary creature you control. Then the Charcoal Diamond. For 2, Charcoal Diamond enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for a swamp. Unstable Obelisk. For 3, you can either tap to add a colorless mana, or for 7 and tap, sacrifice Unstable Obelisk, destroy target permanent. Eaten Alive. For a swamp, as an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature or pay 3 generic in a swamp. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Okay, Mutilate. For 2 swamps and 2, all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. Dread Return. For 2 swamps and 2, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and flashback, sacrifice 3 creatures. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost, then exile it. Okay, Murder. For 2 swamps and 1, destroy target creature. Shard of the Void Dragon. For 3 swamps and 4, it is a 7/7 Catan with flying, and it has the ability of Spear of the Void Dragon. Whenever Shard of the Void Dragon attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. And Matter Absorption. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield or is put into exile from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Shard of the Void Dragon. And then Entomb. For a swamp, search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. Overwhelming Remorse. For a swamp and 4, this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Defiler of Flesh. For 2 swamps and 2, it is a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror with Menace. As an additional cost to cast black permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 swamp less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of black mana you pay. Whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until end of turn. Soul Transfer. For 2 swamps and 1, choose 1. If you control an artifact and an enchantment as you cast this spell, you may choose both. Exile target creature or planeswalker, or return target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. Dark Ritual. For 1 swamp, you can add 3 swamps to your mana pool. The War in Heaven. For 3 swamps and 3, it is a Saga, which is a special enchantment. As this Saga enters, and after your draw step, add a lore counter, sacrifice after chapter 3. So on the first chapter, you draw 3 cards and you lose 3 life. Second chapter, mill 3 cards. For the third chapter, choose up to 3 target creature cards with total mana value 8 or less in your graveyard. Return each of them to the battlefield with a Necrodermis counter on it. They're artifacts in addition to their other types. Sol Ring, a commander staple. For 1, you can tap to add 2 colorless. Gix's Command. For 2 swamps and 3, choose 2. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 creature. It gains lifelink until end of turn. Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, or each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. Cloud Kill. For 2 swamps and 4, all creatures get -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. Bonecaller Cleric. For a swamp and 1, it's a 2/1 human cleric that has the ability of pay 1 swamp and 3, sacrifice Bonecaller Cleric, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. Decree of Pain. For 2 swamps and 6, destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. And then it's got cycling for 2 swamps and 3, and when you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Leech Gauntlet. For a swamp and 1, it is a 2/2 equipment leech with lifelink. Equipped creature has lifelink, and reconfigure 4. Attached to a target creature you control or unattached from a creature. Reconfigure only as a sorcery. While attached, this isn't a creature. Graveyard Shift. For a swamp and 4, this spell has flash as long as there are 5 or more mana values among cards in your graveyard. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And flash allows you to play on not only your turn, but on your opponent's turn as well. So instant spells allow you to play that spell on any turn, whether it's your turn or not. You can only play other cards during your turn. So any card that has flash actually becomes a valuable asset. And then we have Braid's Arisen Nightmare for 2 swamps and 1. It is a 3/3 legendary nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Ambition's Cost. For a swamp and 3, you draw 3 cards and you lose 3 life. Sheoldred Whispering One. For 2 swamps and 5, it is a 6/6 legendary praetor with Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. The Burnished Heart. For 3, it is a 2/2 artifact elk. You can pay 3, sacrifice Burnished Heart, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Swiftfoot Boots. For 2, it is an equipment that has equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and you can equip for 1. Hexproof actually states that that creature cannot be targeted by any spells or abilities that your opponents control, and haste allows you to go ahead and attack with that creature the same turn it was played, instead of having that creature suffer from summoning sickness, which means they can't attack that turn they're played. They have to wait a whole turn. And then we have Pilfer. For a swamp and 1, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Beacon of Unrest. For 2 swamps and 3, put target artifact or creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Shuffle Beacon of Unrest into its owner's library. Hedron Archive. For 4, you can tap it to add 2 colorless, or 2 and tap, sacrifice Hedron Archive, draw 2 cards. Defile. For a swamp, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. Increasing Ambition. For a swamp and 4, search your library for a card and put that card into your hand. If Increasing Ambition was cast from a graveyard, instead search your library for 2 cards and put those cards into your hand, then shuffle your library. And then for flashback, it's got a flashback cost of a swamp and 7. And flashback just allows you to cast the card from your graveyard and then exile it. And then we have Sheoldred the Apocalypse. For 2 swamps and 2. It's a 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. And then the Massacre Worm. For 3 swamps and 3, it is a 6/5 worm. When Massacre Worm enters the battlefield, creatures your opponents control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever a creature an opponent control dies, that player loses 2 life. Mind Stone. For 2, you can tap it to add a colorless mana, or for 1 and tap, sacrifice Mind Stone, draw a card. Dockside Chef. For a swamp, it's a 1/2 human citizen. And you can pay 1 and a swamp, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. Demon's Due. For a swamp and 3, scry 2, then draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. Blood Pact. For a swamp and 2, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. And then the last card in my deck is Tragic Slip. For a swamp, target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Or for the Morbid, that creature gets -13/-13 until end of turn instead if a creature died this turn. And that is every card for the deck profile of my personal commander deck, Shadowheart Dark Justiciar. And with that, that is going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Honestly, I haven't done a deck profile video in a while, and it was really nice to actually do one this time around and showcase off a deck that I have been working on since I have gotten back into Magic the Gathering with the help of Aiden, nonetheless, or with the help of Bakukid. But, yeah, I hope you guys did like and enjoy. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe if you have not already. Also, drop a comment letting me know what you thought or what you think of my personal commander deck. Because we always really like getting comments. But if you want to help support us, there are 3 ways that you can. In the description below, I do have a link to Bakukid's and my Coffee.com, which is our virtual tip jar. You don't have to, but we always enjoy tips when they are dropped into our tip jar. We also have a link to my personal Twitch channel where I have been streaming every Wednesday and Sunday, and sometimes I have been dropping some other surprise streams as well throughout the week. And sometimes on the weekends when I've got Bakukid, we will do a father-son stream, which is always fun for us to do. And also in the description below is a link to our sponsor W Energy, and by using our coupon code NERDBOYS, NERDBOYS, you can save 10% at checkout when you purchase any W product. But until next video, I am Bakudad signing out, one half of the Baku Boys, and always remember to Bakugan Brawl, let it rip, and stay awesome and nerdy. Peace out, guys.